Welcome, real estate rock stars, or more importantly, real estate rock and rollers. So you want to be a rock and roller? Well, let's get this show on the road. We're now at session 10 in this series. Of course, this is about momentum. It makes the assumption, if you're not already there, that you're aspiring to get into a place where you've now got market share. Not so much that you want to cruise, but you want to automate most of what goes on in terms of your prospect flow. You want to cement or consolidate your market share. Yes, looking a little bit worse for wear on the back of the lockdowns that have occurred. So this is, what are we now? Getting close to day 100. So there's a good 3 months growth on the top and the bottom. I only grow hair pretty much from the neck up. I am looking forward to breaking free from this. But what I'm also looking forward to is the opportunity that exists in and around this market. I know that there is a strong variation, of course, dependent on where you are in New Zealand. You know, some of you are well restricted, pretty much the same as our friends down south of the border where I am in Victoria have been rather draconian in that you can't actually conduct or run listing presentations. We have had a lot of success. Those of you that are on the property marketer platform and are using Listing Pad, we have been able to figure out how to, get something together where you can run that online, perhaps in a Zoom presentation or something similar. So that's relatively handy and one that you can talk through with us. And there's lots of other things that have gone on with it. I was actually talking to one of our rock stars north of the border. Of course, we've got Lincoln Tatnell up there, Justin Hicks, who's just killing it despite all of the restrictions that have gone on. But relative to the other states, they haven't had anywhere near the problem that we've had. And if we've said this all along, I'll just say it one more time, because today, session 10, this is about beyond compare, about moving into a space where, comparatively speaking, you're beyond comparison. And I just love this little title because it's just got so many variations on the take and how you can present it out there in the marketplace. That you're an agent that is professionally beyond compare of others, the prices that you are achieving because you understand how to meld marketing, communication, and indeed, as a negotiator, you know how to meld those skills to a point where the value that you are getting, the market value that you're deriving, is indeed beyond compare. So we'll talk about that today. So just around the traps, with the big thing that we covered off here, the last time that we got together was talking about accolades, and the week before that, the PSRG, and just looking at getting some continuity and the same theme flowing through. The way that we've presented this, on all levels, and I'm sure you'd all be aware that basically our property careers platform is for sales associates, those aspiring to become sales professionals or sales professionals looking to reinvigorate their market and get a strong foothold, which is, of course, the springboard to moving into building market share, but just penetrating that market in the initial sense. We've even got real estate rock stars on here right now. So Vasco Horder, who's over there in the Perth market, he's looking at breaking new markets that are immediately around the location of his office into a higher precinct. And he's all the way back to foothold. So he's out there doing the hard grind. Of course, he's looking to employ a sales associate, and that's something else that we're doing. But he says, if nothing else, I'm getting exercise. I'm out there having a look at the market. And he's very much focused all the way back, which we all should be consciously aware of, understanding that the key to breaking a market, despite everything they say about online being the new platform and the way to go, and I'm not disputing that for a second, But I still say the number one draw card for any active property seller is most certainly sign presence in the area. So if you can manufacture that quickly, of course, if you've already broken the market or you've got listings coming on, you need to build on that and focus on the big three prospect generators. They, of course, are, which I'm sharing with all of those people in or the sales associates in property careers prospector school. Those major things that you want to aspire to are sales inquiry or the SEL. Again, we've talked about that ad nauseum pretty much, mostly on the sales trainer platform. Welcome homes. I know that the restrictions have made those almost impossible to do that the way that they were, but you know, I'll just make mention of this very quickly. If you do have new listings coming into the market and the restrictions are such that you can't conduct an open for inspection, there is nothing to prevent you from getting a welcome home invitation out there to the market and just saying that this is when we're doing the inspections between, 11 till 2 or whatever it is on the Saturday, on the Sunday, depending upon where you are. And, you're welcome if you're an active property seller researching the market ahead of selling to give us a call and come and have a look at this property, if for no other reason, to run a comparison between it and yours. I am quite okay with us doing that. This is still good connection. This is still engaging active property sellers, which of course we need to do. And then the final one is, of course, the leveraging things. So what we've been doing in the prospecting mode with the sales associates is we've been teaching them about the protocol to follow, making sure that their conversation is centric to the motive. This, of course, opens up opportunities. And big change that we've made is we've had them out there at the moment. I'm just about to run with this through Nick Saparovich and his team, Hannah there, who's working in the blue area, and getting them to, once we've identified property sellers, to put together a comparative market analysis, shoot that out with a cover letter that is consistent with the property seller's research guide, in that it says that pricing is largely subjective. Comparative pricing is largely a matter of opinion, and this might differ. So you don't give your opinion in that CMA, but by giving that information across to an active property seller, I know it sounds early, despite the fact that you've yet to be down there to run a listing education presentation, whatever you want to call it. At least this creates a platform for good engagement and good conversation during the follow-up. So I'm saying, get that out there, make sure the cover letter goes with it, and put them on the SMS router, make sure that they receive the property seller's research guide almost straight away, then move them through to things like the newsletter is coming out. We then send them out what we call our accolades and recommendations, and this was a huge subject that we covered in the last edition of Real Estate RocknRolla Online. We talked about how important it is to have continuity of every seller that you get, to get their recommendation, to put it on the listing on the property marketer platform with something like accolades. Stay away from, early at least during the prospecting phase, things like Rate My Agent and some of those REA, and I don't know if they have they do have Rate My Agent in New Zealand, and whether they do the same thing, for example, with their version of realestate.com or trademe.com. But stay away from those, because if you're utilizing those in prospecting and getting your recommendations out through there, each time a client sees that, they're also going to have their attention drawn to your competition. So I just don't think this is relevant at the moment for prospecting. So if you've got something like accolades, you can use that on social media and a whole range of other platforms, Google Plus, and be drawing people in. They're only going to come back to you directly. So I say this is way, way, way more important. So just to recap, familiarizing yourself with the property seller's research guide. I know that we've actually got Nick Saparovich's version coming out. I'm just about to do something with Lincoln Tatnall up there. There's a new branding. They'll be doing this with Justin Hicks and his team at Madeline Hicks Real Estate as they rebrand, you know, all the way through. So if you're down south, it's very important that you've got some sort of documentation. I know that we used to have the pre-listing kit. I think they've kind of lost their potency. I would be way, way, way more focused on the delivery of a document that makes or basically creates your contrasted point of difference. So much so that you don't want to have, especially at the real estate rockstar level, you don't want to have sellers comparing you directly with the competition. You see, I would, rather than you trying to compete with your competitors, I'd rather they're competing with you, because you're establishing this contrasted point of difference. So what we see as a recap inside the PSRG, it openly draws the difference and explains the difference between comparative value versus market value, making it clear that the sellers will receive market value. So that's the important number. And your job is to make that important. But of course, everything else is motive centric. It also concedes that finding a buyer is the easy part, and makes them aware of the value variables, those of which we have no control over. So this kind of removes the onus on you as a real estate salesperson to take control of those things and gets you in charge of that moving forward as well, and then draws attention to the fact that they should be selecting an agent based upon their professional capacity as a marketer, negotiator, and communicator. Concedes the fact that it's not about advertising, but they should invest in marketing, because marketing is the perception that it creates, and all of these things in place. So those of you that are working direct with sales associates that you have supporting you, we're making all them aware of all those things, and everything that they're delivering out there is relatively consistent. And in their dialogue, we're making sure that their orientation is motive centric, and that indeed the last edition that we did last week is that they're making that connection across with sellers. In Sales Trainer, we did all those very same things we've just talked about. We focused on the listing education. Of course, the premise of Sales Trainer is that you do have listings. So we move into traction about turning one listing into two into four, and so on. So that's all about regeneration. This is something that should be automated within the domicile of you as a real estate rockstar, or if you're yet to get there, that you want to make that transition and move into the space of momentum, retaining market share, or just marginally improving it so that you're taking control inside that space. So we also talked last week with at the Sales Trainer level predominantly about promotion, and put a lot of emphasis on how marketing should be an investment. Some of us start to forget this, especially as markets start to challenge us a little bit, or the market has been relatively easy where it's been undersupplied. There are immediate buyers for most properties that hit the market. And then, of course, when the seller turns around and says, well, why do I have to pay for the advertising? We fall into that hole. I make this very clear that advertising doesn't sell real estate, and I'm quite prepared to concede that. Yeah. Because does advertising sell real estate? No, it does not. Let's face it, people come to us because we're already supposed to have buyers, and, we all know that we do. So we do have buyers, and finding the buyer is the easy part, but leveraging the value, this is where the problem creeps in. And that's why you as a real estate rockstar ought to be very quick, or very slow, or more importantly, composed and very comfortable about giving the explanation to an incumbent property seller, an active property seller researching the market, that when this off-market debate comes up, yeah, it's okay to maybe give that a go, but I still think that the marketing is important, because what we understand as real estate rockstars is marketing. Yes, there's a component of marketing. It's called advertising. The purpose of an ad is to get inquiry, and that's about getting the message out. and about finding more buyers. And yeah, you know, I kind of half buy this argument that the more buyers you get, you know, the more readily there's going to be competition for that property, and that might drive the price up. But as I've always said, well, what do you do in the absence of competition? What if there's only one or two buyers? Or what if there's only one buyer that's at a premium? How do you push them even further? Well, that's where the skill of a negotiator comes into play. And I often say to a seller, you know, if there's been an agent that's come in before me and has kind of said, you know, we need to promote it, need to have competition in order to drive the price up, I just point that out to them. I say, well, hang on, here's a couple of points I need to make. First of all, what are they going to do in the absence of competition? And more importantly for you as a seller, how many of these have you got to sell? And they go, one. So we don't need really more than one buyer. But importantly, what I think we need is the buyer. And the buyer is the one who sees things the way we need to see them in the first instance, in satisfying your motives so that you can get on with your plans and perhaps have a little bit more money than you had planned for. And in the second instance, that we can leverage that value to a premium level where you get that nice surprise of getting or realizing a market value that is higher than comparative value. And this, of course, leads me into that point where I start to talk about how an agent, and this is the important, or I guess the premise of what we needed to talk about today, is how an agent drives an understanding that is consistent with the beyond compare mantra. One of the other subjects I'll be talking about in weeks to come is the who moved me. And I look at this and I say openly to any property seller, very, very calmly. And this is something that you can do on the premise of a top or a peak performance professional. You see, I reckon the quickest way to sell someone something is to create a degree of scarcity. And so often, as our career progresses, when we start, you know, we're very servile. Anything that even remotely looks like an opportunity, we want to exploit. Again, as you move into that level of professionalism, when you're starting to learn how to list properties, you're getting a good handle on selling them and working with buyers, we then start to look at, you know, getting volume. How can we get more listings? This still has us, generally speaking, pandering to sellers. I'd like to think at this level, for those of you that have been doing it for a while, the transition that you need to be looking at making here is moving into the space where you can choose the sellers you want. Now, all the way along, I've always made it very clear that the premise of prospecting is surplus. You need to have a prospecting regime in place that actually has you attracting more opportunities than you need. Now, this can actually be established in the first instance by making sure that the market that you covet has the capacity to deliver the number of listings that you need, but also surplus in terms of opportunity. Once you've got that established and you know how to make the connection with those sellers and you fall onto the shopping list, well, now you're in the luxurious disposition of not having scarcity. And let's make this perfectly clear. Scarcity is the direct cause and effect of discounting fee. Why do agents discount a fee? Well, basically because there's a scarcity. They're afraid they're not going to win that listing. So that's the first instance. So all concessions typically come out of scarcity. If we move to the abundance mode, well, then we're in the box office. And once you're in the box office, it's almost like when you go down to do a presentation, and I really need you all to hang on to this. I'm fascinated. You know, just the other day, I had one of our sales professionals who's moving up, Paul McDowell over in New Zealand. So he's been out, we've been doing loads of training around negotiation, around the listing presentation. And he goes out to run a listing presentation and comes back from the presentation. Anyway, there's some correspondence that comes through from the lady who he presented to. And the opening sentence of that particular letter basically says, you're the best agent that I've seen, and I really want to use you. From there, it goes on to then say, but the other agents that I've seen, more or less around this, their fee percentage-wise is more competitive than yours is. And some of them have even agreed to keep in for the marketing. Now, I find this incredibly fascinating because Paul then comes back to me and says, okay, I need to write back to this person. What should I do? And blah, blah, blah. I said, mate, why is it that in that correspondence, you've chosen to focus on the fact that they're asking for a discount, or you've chosen to focus on the fact that they're looking or trying to push you into a position where you'll engage the idea of the company or you paying for the marketing? When indeed marketing is an investment and we haven't even embarked on the journey of selling this, you choose to focus on that. Instead, here's where I'm focused. And I just want to make this point very clear. All I could see in that correspondence with that particular seller was this: they've decided they're going to use you. I think your immediate response should be, well, thank you very much. I'm glad that we could make that connection, and I'm looking forward to giving you the best value that any real estate professional has ever given you. And this will, of course, will be by way of the result that we have. You can then acknowledge the fact that you did see or read that other agents have been more competitive around fee. And you could just go, well, of course, to my mind, I just look at it and go, well, of course they have. Because here's the thing, those other agents don't perceive or see themselves to be as proficient as I am, and they don't have the same resource that I have. Therefore, from their point of view, it's almost an admission that the result that they would likely achieve might be inferior. So the only way that they can clearly see that they can compete with me is to offer you a lower fee, or indeed look at kicking the can. Now let's examine this on the whole. Surely you want to maximize the net proceeds that you get from this sale. That's perhaps why you're asking for that discount. They say, yeah. So well, given that you're looking at doing that, and I can see that I like to think that you've made the right decision, but if you look at me and the other agents, by virtue of the fact that you have focused, or you have said that I'm the best agent and you want to run with me, you must be saying that you perceive me to be the best salesperson. That's your summation. Yeah. Well, what do you reckon comes with the best salesperson? The higher percentage or a discounted percentage? They go, well, the higher percentage. Okay. But here's the thing. You're looking to make sure that the value you receive is consistent with the value given. Well, that's pretty easy. You see, because the reality of the real estate transaction is you are in total control of it from a negotiable position. Because until you approve of what you receive, I don't get paid a cent. I don't get anything. And I'm only paid on the contingent that you do approve. So here's the point. If I get you to the point where you approve and you're getting what you want, can I have what I want? It's important that you are able to establish this the right way. So that's the first one. Now I move to the marketing and I say, look, and insofar as the marketing goes, can you understand that that's not, as you're seeing it right now, that is not an expense, it's actually an investment. They go, what do you mean? I say, well, you're looking at this through your eyes and you're looking at it as an expense. And look, whilst that $3,000 or $4,000 seems like a lot of money, in the context of marketing your property, it's not a lot of money. Because if that $3,000 goes into improving the overall perception of your property, that can create a leveraging so that the value that you get ends up being beyond compare. Let me explain what I mean. If you were sat there with that $3,000 and over this side of the table, I had $5, $10, $15, $20,000, and I slid that big pile back and said, just give me the small pile, how would you feel about making that investment then? And I say, well, I suppose it'd be okay. Well, now here's the thing. You're asking, or you're saying that you're attracted by the agent that says that they'll invest in the marketing. But see, I don't think they're going to invest in a program that totals 3,000. I think, given that they have to now embrace that as an expense, that they're going to do the minimal amount or go with the minimal amount of spend to just get the job done. Don't you think? So now you're in a position where you are going to get the barest of subsistence to just get the job done, and you are literally encouraging mediocrity to come into play. So now all they're doing is you're encouraging the agent to fulfill the transaction. And whilst I'm at it, given that they've now made an investment, all they're interested in is getting the transaction done so that they can recoup their costs. Whereas with me, you are encouraging the quality of result, of which you are the judge the whole way through, because until you approve, I don't get paid. And you need to understand that insofar as the marketing investment goes, not 1 cent of that finds its way to me. I do not receive anything for the marketing investment. And in fact, I'm quite frugal, but at the same time, I don't want to dilute the pout of it. So when I'm looking at the overall transaction, I will always cut fat for you, but I will never cut muscle. And muscle's the most important thing you need from a marketing perspective to greatly enhance its perception, which then creates the value perception. This is only understood by agents that understand their beyond compare analogy. Despite what any agent tells you, no two properties are the same to a buyer that becomes interested in one. And once they're interested, it's at that point, the moment they walk through the front door, that the marketing has to be in place, because if their perception is maximized at that point, this then openly translates to their perception of value is at a maximum, and it's giddy up from there. Everything works to your advantage. This is where the idea of a beyond compare agent is important. And what I now want to say to you is this, and I don't mean this by any means to be rude, but if you don't get me, you don't get me. And they go, what do you mean? Well, what I'm trying to say to you is that ours is the only profession where the best is actually the most economical choice. So if you've made that decision and you've already identified me as the best salesperson, I want you to understand you've already made the economical choice. Now, what you don't want to do is dissuade me from taking this on, because at the moment, I can only take a maximum of 15 properties at any one time. So there comes a point where I just can't service the number of people that I have in place. So if you don't get me, I don't mean any offense by this, but you just don't get me. I hope that makes a lot of sense. I hope that you're locking on to the ideal of moving into the space where you're beyond compare agent. And before any of you sit there and start saying to yourself, oh, that sounds okay, just sitting there doing it, I challenge you. I challenge you to take me on. I challenge you, if you really have to, take me with you. I'll sit in front of any one of your clients and move through this space. I'll walk you through it. I'll get you to the point where your confidence is at a point where, this is not arrogance, by the way. This is being professionally fit and understanding that most of your competition are pretty much bringing a knife to a gunfight. Anyway, my name's Mark Dwyer. You can contact me, Mark with a K, at realestaterockstar.com.au. Or you can contact me on +61 410 592 165. Thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to catching you on the next installment of Real Estate Rocknrolla, where all of us are moving into the space of being an agent that really is beyond compare.